You've ever noticed how some words sound hollow amid the silence that carries its own scream? There is an abyss between the "I love you" that echoes empty and the deep desire to speak directly to the man's soul who, behind a restrained smile, harbors wounds as old as time. It is in that symbolic space, made of gestures and words that touch the unconscious, that the true strength of affection is revealed, not the exact and predictable affection, but that which is capable of activating archetypal keys, of awakening something dormant in his chest. If this kind of reflection truly touches you, perhaps this is your place. Consider subscribing to the channel. The "I love you" is an expression that has been emptied in everyday language, especially for the man who carries unvoiced emotional wounds. Carl Jung said that the unconscious understands symbols and not rational concepts. Therefore, certain phrases, even simple ones, have profound emotional power. These phrases are like archetypal keys. Each touches an essential aspect of the wounded, desirous, exhausted, or seeking meaning masculine. Erich Fromm reminds us that true love demands symbolic understanding of the other, not just emotional expression. When a woman learns to speak in the symbolic language of the masculine unconscious, she creates real connection, and not just a fleeting romantic effect. This video reveals phrases that touch the man where he most needs it, but would never say. Thus, they are stronger than "I love." You cannot tell me from. Allow yourself now to feel the weight of this promise. We are not talking about ready-made advice, rigid phrases, or mechanical declarations. We speak of something that pulses in the veins of the masculine psyche, of something that germinates in the soil of the wounded soul and needs a symbolic breath to bloom. Imagine each phrase as a chord capable of vibrating at the frequency of the unconscious, bringing to light unhealed wounds, but offering a path to inner reconciliation. You know, deep down that words sound more truthful when they echo your internal struggle. The silent effort, the fear of abandonment, the burden of leadership, the yearning to protect, and the desire to touch something eternal. It is in these hidden rhythms that the power dwells to transform the ordinary into the mythological, to renew the bond that sustains the human in all its complexity. Over the next few minutes, each phrase we present will act like a balm or a gentle blade, opening paths to symbolic healing. You will be guided to understand how each declaration, far from being a mere compliment, is an act of true listening. A listening not of the ears, but of the shadow that inhabits his heart, that place that rarely finds voice in the conventional discourse of love. Feel this proposal as an invitation to silence the "I love you" that echoes soullessly and replace it with words rooted in something deeper, something woven in the language of archetypes, requiring no performance, no convenience, only presence. It is in this symbolic presence that the potential resides for a bond that does not dissipate in the winds of difficult days, but remains like sacred fire, sustaining both in their purest vulnerability. His arrival home often goes unnoticed. His body demands rest, but his eyes search for a sign of welcome that almost never comes. In the silence of the hallway, before shedding the day's armor, there is an echo, the echo of unrecognized effort, of a weight that no external applause relieves. It is in that instant, when the desire to rid himself of worries almost convinces him to remain silent forever, that the word can be a balm, not the empty word, but the one that says, "I noticed how hard you worked today. I noticed how hard you worked today." These 7 syllables, seemingly simple, have the power to illuminate the face of the man who feels invisible. Touch his body with this phrase, and you will see his shoulders relax, his chest soften. It is as if an invisible hand lifted the burden he insists on carrying alone. It is not just praise. It is recognition of a silent struggle that for many remains lonely and too logical to transform into words. You don't have to handle everything. How many times does he believe that if he stops for a second, everything will collapse? It is an ancestral fear. If he lets down his guard, both inner and outer worlds will shatter. This phrase is permission, permission to fail, permission to be weak, permission to simply breathe without guilt. When this phrase sounds, it is like breaking chains forged by the precarious belief that strength is an obligation. You have the right to be tired. There is a feeling of loneliness and fatigue that finds no name. He carries in his body the signaling, "I cannot stop." Not until he is enough for every expectation, nor until he is worthy of love. Saying that he has the right to that fatigue is offering him a seat beside his own humanity, where judgment is suspended and compassion reigns. These words activate the archetype of the forgotten warrior, the hero beaten by daily battles, who learned to hide his wounds so as not to appear weak. Upon hearing these phrases, he feels that he is not alone in life's battlefield. He senses that someone noticed his invisible effort and validated his pain. This recognition symbolizes a lap he never had but always sought. It is in that moment of deep identification that the urgency arises to keep this conversation alive. If this resonated with you in some way, leave a like. It shows these conversations are necessary. When the woman delivers these phrases in the tone of someone who truly listens, she offers something no ordinary declaration of love can match, a symbolic mirror where the man sees himself recognized, accepted, and finally validated. It is the salt of life entering the pores of the relationship, giving flavor to the love that transforms into shared strength. In that space, the surface of I love you dissolves, giving way to an affection that heals profoundly. Within him there is a subtle yearning to belong, not out of utility, but for who he is in his essence. As if love needed a seal of approval that goes beyond completed tasks and assumed roles. When the woman declares, "I admire you as a man, not just as a partner," she points to a part of him that often feels reduced to a function. In that instant, something ignites in the silence of his chest, as if someone lit a candle in the penumbra of his identity. "I admire you as a man, not just as a partner." These words reverberate in the core of the integrated animus, that internal figure seeking a genuine expression, not molded by social expectations. He realizes that his value does not depend exclusively on the role he plays, but on every gesture, every hesitation, and every virtue beyond mere utility. It is like a sun breaking through the mist of a distant mountain, revealing colors he had forgotten existed. Next, the phrase, "I like who you are even on your dark days." When the shadow within him surfaces, he feels the fear of being abandoned. He may have grown believing that acceptance would be conditional on performance or his contagious joy. Hearing that someone appreciates him exactly in the dark, he touches the right to his own darkness. This recognition creates a safe space where every internal crack can murmur its lament without fear of retaliation. Finally, "You don't need to change for me to stay." How many times has he silenced parts of himself to fit into loves that demanded unattainable standards? Upon hearing this permission to keep his edges, his outdated beliefs, even his quirks that make him unique, he is liberated. It is as if a dammed river had its flow restored, carrying away debris of insecurity and opening a path for a current of confidence. These phrases dissolve the unconscious fear of abandonment conditioned on performance. Each word is a gesture of radical presence, not a contract of exchange but a pact of acceptance. He feels seen beyond utility, beyond what he can offer in tasks or guarantees. He feels desired for being whole, with imperfections that make him alive. Imagine the scene. He enters the living room carrying worries like invisible burdens. She looks into his eyes, holds time with her soft voice and says, "I admire you as a man, not just as a partner." He breathes deeply. Tension leaves his shoulders, and something opens inside him. A gentle tap on the social mask that forced him to be strong, to be spectacular. He realizes that, for the first time in a long time, he doesn't have to prove anything. If this truth resonated with you, know that sharing these words with another woman is an act of care, an invitation for more souls to learn to use the language of the unconscious. In this symbolic tapestry, love shifts from a logic of utility to a dance of souls. It is not a prize to be won, but a being to be celebrated in its entirety. By activating the integrated animus, the woman offers not only affection, but a deep mirror where the man recognizes himself without fear of judgment. It is there, in that open field of acceptance, that the kind of desire that does not exhaust itself is born, the desire to be seen, to belong, and to remain. There is an invisible crown upon his shoulders, made of ancestral expectations that whisper, "If you falter, everything collapses." He walks with the weight of decisions that are not his alone to bear, as if the fortress he built in the silence of his mind were his only refuge, until his body cries for help. It is at that moment of veiled exhaustion that the gentle word becomes profound relief. You can let me lead today. You can let me lead today. Upon hearing this phrase, the lonely king feels the scepter loosen in his hand. The sensation is of walking in a secret garden, where the ground welcomes each step without demanding victory. There is a gentle surrender, an invitation for him to allow himself to be protected by another's strength, instead of carrying the intact burden of leadership. In that brief verbal sigh, he realizes that relinquishing control does not mean weakness, but trust. I trust you, even when I'm not sure. These words are a mirror reflecting his own insecurity with compassion, validating the fear of making mistakes. For the man accustomed to hiding doubts, they bring permission to be human, to doubt in the dark, and still feel accepted. Each syllable embraces uncertainty as an indispensable part of the journey, as if to say, your hesitant steps are also worthy of trust. You don't have to be strong right now. When his body trembles from no longer bearing up, these 5 words create a sacred space where his armor falls away. He who learned to shield his chest finds in the notes of this phrase the right to feel fatigue, to exhale accumulated exhaustion without risk of seeming unworthy. It is like a balm that soothes the heart's rigidity, reminding him that even for a king, rest is the most courageous act. In this scene, imagine him seated at dusk on a stone bench, surrounded by blooming azaleas. The air carries a scent of damp earth, and each petal represents a silent offering of relief. When she utters one of these phrases, his world expands, flooded by a peace he never dared name. The lonely king raises his eyes and finds, in her face, permission to lay down the crown and finally breathe. If these words sounded like a solace for your own weariness, share this video with another woman who needs to hear this. Offering a man this space for symbolic pause is more than relieving pressure. It is recognizing his right to vulnerability. It is allowing him to transcend the archetype of relentless leadership and discover the humanity that dwells behind all power. In that lap without hierarchy, an intimacy is born that no longer demands proof, but celebrates mutual surrender. When his silence encounters these phrases, he not only rests, he remembers that he is not alone in the crown he carries, and it is in that shared recognition that the foundation of a love that sustains, gentle and indestructible, is truly built. There is a moment when the man recognizes his purpose beyond brute force and control. It is when he feels that the care he offers finds echo in her sincere vulnerability. In that instant, his protective instinct awakens like an underground river breaking ancient barriers. When she says, "When you listen to me, I feel safe," something profound stirs in the chilled lake of his heart. When you listen to me, I feel safe. It is not just gratitude, it is symbolic validation of the guardian role that runs through the veins of the masculine. He realizes that his attentive gaze and serene words are not superfluous gestures, but acts that build an emotional shelter. This recognition summons him beyond the need to control. It calls him to uphold a space where intimacy can flourish without fear. By pronouncing these words, she offers him confirmation that his care is in itself a sacred act. I open up to you because I feel you truly see me. In this declaration, she reveals the bridge connecting 2 souls. By placing her trust in his reception, she invites him to witness her entire being, without artifice, without defenses. For the man who often feels captive to expectations, this phrase is a mirror reflecting his value as interlocutor of the feminine soul. It is like discovering that his hands can hold not only the tools of the world, but also the heart of one who needs a safe harbor. Your gaze calms me. 3 words that touch the core of his instinct. The realization that his attentive silence and stable presence are as powerful as any heroic gesture. Upon hearing that his gaze calms, he discovers that he does not need to raise walls or brandish metaphorical weapons to be strong. His strength lies in his capacity to radiate trust and serenity, to anchor the one he loves on firm ground. These phrases activate the archetype of the silent guardian, that inner figure pulsating in the deep masculine, eager to protect without dominating. He feels summoned to fulfill his most genuine function, not that of inflexible leader, but of compassionate caretaker. When each word touches this archetype, the relationship transcends the rational plane and reaches the symbolic field, where mutual care strengthens the most vulnerable bonds. Imagine the scene. She's seated in an antique armchair, soft light filtered through the curtain, her hands clasped in front of her chest. He, standing beside her, hesitates for a second, uncertain whether he may touch her fragility. Then she looks up and utters, "When you listen to me, I feel safe." He breathes and feels the weight of his armor dissolving because, for the first time, he understands that his serene presence is the most powerful care. Visualize his body relaxing, his heart opening in receptivity. He thought impossible. He feels purpose pulse again, not that of performance or conquest, but that of love that protects and sustains. It is as if, by activating the silent guardian, he found his way back inside himself, rediscovering the meaning of his own sensitivity. By offering these declarations, the woman kindles the flame of deep reciprocal care, where every gesture and every word strengthen the bridge between two internal worlds. She invites him to assume, without guilt, his place as emotional protector, a place where strength manifests in tenderness and surrender becomes an act of courage. In that symbolic and essential space, an intimacy is born that needs no grand words, but declarations that speak to the unconscious. And it is in that silent meeting of glances and voices that love becomes sacred support, capable of weathering life's storms without collapsing. There is a microscopic instant in which the external world dissolves and only two souls remain entwined in silence. It is there that poetic words laden with hidden meaning touch the deepest structures of the masculine unconscious. When she says, "You touched me in a way no one ever has," she is pointing to a primal experience, as if opening a portal to an internal territory he thought was deserted. That phrase reverberates at the core of his being, confirming that his touch not only reached her body, but reached the very root of who she is. "You touched me in a way no one ever has." It bears the weight of a sacramental seal. Upon uttering it, she celebrates his capacity to transcend symbolic barriers, to shape in his chest a space where she recognizes herself whole. It is the invitation for him to enter the secret temple of the feminine, where each word echoes like a mantra and each gesture is a rite. For a brief second, he feels he is participating in a rite of passage granted only to those who dare to connect truly. "When you touch me, I remember myself." This phrase is an ancestral mirror. By uniting body and memory, it activates the call of the living anima, that internal feminine part living in every man, seeking reconciliation with the sacred. He realizes that his touch resonates not only in the present, but in forgotten emotional maps, bringing forth memories of himself once imprisoned in shadows. It is as if an ancient echo, lost in the chambers of the unconscious, finds its voice again. "I feel you, even when you're not here." It may seem paradoxical, but it is precisely in that paradox that the symbolic mystery is unveiled. Words emanating permanence and transcendence. He understands, without further explanation, that her presence has extended beyond physical space, penetrating the domain of imagination and affection. This phrase weaves an invisible thread between hearts, making each absence, in fact, an opportunity for intermittent but constant presence. When these declarations are spoken with the truth of one who knows the language of symbols, they become mantras capable of laying the foundation for a bond that does not fade with time. He feels the call of an intimacy without the scent of routine, but with the perfume of eternity. In that silent dialogue between touches and silences, an existential fusion is born. Not the dangerous fusion that negates individuality, but the mythical fusion that celebrates separation, united by the desire to consecrate each moment. Each of these phrases is a key to the secret vault where his soul rests. By inserting them into discourse, the woman reveals the foundation of a love that does not wear out but strengthens, does not consume but illuminates. It is in that symbolic field, where each word is a seed of immortality, that the bond reaches its purest form, the form of personal myth, lived in each encounter, repeated in every memory, eternalized in the heart. There is an instant when everything left unspoken gains voice. It is when the woman who has learned to speak the symbolic language of the masculine unconscious closes the circle of affection, not with a scream but with a whisper, imbued with meaning. In that final moment, the phrases are no longer mere words, they are hierophanies, revelations that illuminate the mystery of a profound love, capable of traversing ancient wounds and restoring the fullness of each being. Carl Jung showed us that the language of the soul is not the literal one, but the symbolic. Hence, certain phrases touch where "I love you" no longer reaches. Clarissa Pinkola Estes reveals that the woman who knows how to name the invisible heals what no passion can resolve. Speaking to the true man requires listening first, not with the ears, but to his shadow. By offering these phrases, the woman does not manipulate. She restores humanity to the man who was never permitted to feel, and therefore she becomes unforgettable, not for intensity, but for depth. The woman who speaks to the archetype, and not to the mask, activates the rarest desire, the desire to remain. It is here in the silence between each word that resides the power to be remembered without shouting, a power that does not impose but invites, that does not demand a response, but awakens an echo. Upon closing this symbolic dialogue, what remain are scars that become tattoos of wisdom, memories that do not erase, desires that transform into mutual compassion. It is in this sacred space that love reveals itself as a living, dynamic, and eternal work. A mosaic of meanings that continues to unfold as long as two hearts dance together. If something inside you opened with this video, write in the comments. Sometimes sharing also heals, and if you wish to continue on this soul journey, we are here whenever you want to return.